Betrayal was the final straw. That was the moment I realized I had to act decisively. They had disrespected my daughter. They had disrespected me, and they would not continue to do so. After leaving the notice on the doorstep, they screamed, yelled, and called relentlessly, trying to guilt me, trying to intimidate me. But I ignored every call, every text, every attempt to provoke. 3 days later, my aunt came too that Christmas. I was working a double shift in the ER. The fluorescent lights buzzing overhead while monitors beeped and groans of pain mixed with panicked voices filled the room. Meanwhile, my parents and sister had made a quiet, unspoken decision that my 16-year-old daughter, Abby, didn't belong at the family Christmas dinner. They told her there wasn't space, that the table was full, that the beds were all taken. She drove herself home that night, a newly minted driver proud to show her independence, and ended up alone in our quiet house. I didn't explode. I didn't yell. I did what I always did. I acted. The next morning, I found a letter waiting at my parents' doorstep. I could hear the shouting echo before the words even reached me. But first, Christmas Eve had unfolded like a slow-motion nightmare. I returned home just before midnight, every bone in my body aching from resuscitating a man whose skin had turned an alarming shade of blue, insisting all the while that he was just tired. My feet felt like lead as I opened the door and froze at the sight of Abby's boots by the front hall. My heart skipped a beat. Then I saw her coat draped across the armrest, her overnight bag still zipped up, and her body curled on the couch in that tense, defensive position. She was supposed to be at my parents' house. She had insisted on driving herself this year, a small act of trust, and had even left early to be punctual. That plan had worked for us until it didn't, Abby. I called softly. Her eyes flicked open instantly. "Hey," she said quietly. "Why are you here?" She sat up slowly, the wobbly smile masking disappointment. "They said there wasn't any room." I blinked. "Room where?" "At the table," she whispered, her voice breaking slightly, masked with a shrug that didn't fool anyone. "They weren't expecting me. Too many people. Grandma said she couldn't add a chair last minute. I just left." Stared at her. "Did anyone offer to take you home?" "No, did they at least let you eat?" Another shrug. The table had been full. My usual seat taken, my daughter Lily getting attention, the rest ignoring her existence. It was just a full house, she said. A cold, lonely slice of toast on a paper towel with half a banana beside it became her Christmas dinner. I felt a twist of fury and grief that I hadn't recognized before. She wasn't angry. She wasn't rebellious. She was hurt, small, vulnerable, and trying to mask it with quiet resignation. "I wasn't that hungry anyway," she murmured. But her eyes told the story: betrayal, confusion, and a child's attempt to internalize adult cruelty. I held her, letting the silence do what words never could. Eventually, she wiped her nose, whispered softly, "I know they don't like you. But I thought she cut herself off. I thought they just didn't want me, not you." That moment, that mix of innocence and understanding, was more painful than anything I had ever experienced. She tried to brave it, tried to act like it wasn't a knife twisting in her chest, but she was just 16. That night, I sat alone in the kitchen, staring at the empty counter where her dinner had been, replaying the countless sacrifices I had made for them. The medical bills, the utilities, the emergencies I had covered without hesitation, and realized the cruel truth. They hadn't run out of space. They had run out of gratitude. The next morning, my husband and I spoke quietly. "So, what do we do now?" he asked. I didn't answer immediately. Deep down, I already knew. I wasn't turning the other cheek anymore. That switch flipped that night. Not for revenge, not for spite, but for protection, for Abby, for my daughter's right to feel safe and loved. That week, I left a formal eviction notice on their doorstep. They found it, screamed, cried, and tried to manipulate the situation, but I held firm. I had bought the house they lived in. The mortgage was under my name, the utilities paid, their medical coverage arranged. This wasn't about money. This was about respect, boundaries, and finally asserting control over a family dynamic that had been toxic my entire life. Memories of my childhood surged back, my parents' subtle cruelty, my sister's manipulations, the constant comparisons, the jokes disguised as concern but always at my expense. When I was 6, I found a dead bird and asked to examine it. My mother yelled. My sister screamed. They made me feel ashamed for curiosity, for intelligence, for simply existing as myself. In high school, I was different. Studious, ambitious, quietly excelling while everyone else floated. My parents' teasing and my sister's derision taught me early that intelligence was a crime in my family. By the time I became a doctor, I had already learned to give my heart in pieces, to sacrifice endlessly, and to navigate a family that viewed my success as a threat. I had bought the house for them years ago, covered bills, helped whenever they asked. But the Christmas Eve speak gently, but I told her everything. The bills, the mortgage, the cold dinner, the countless small cruelties. She left unable to justify their actions. Weeks later, the house was officially on the market, and buyers required the house to be vacant. I didn't attend the removal. I didn't need to. Official processes ensured everything was in order. Janelle, my sister, tried to spin it to the extended family, claiming I had abandoned them over one holiday misunderstanding. Within weeks, she too relented and moved them into a rundown rental. Small rooms, minimal comforts, a reality they had never endured before. Their pensions barely covered rent and groceries. No vacations. No cruises. No parties. Just the reality of their actions catching up to them. Meanwhile, Abby thrived. Free from their influence, she focused on school, on herself, on the love and support she deserved. The money from the house sale went beyond tuition. It gave her and me peace. I no longer returned their calls. I no longer lost sleep. I had chosen my daughter, finally, decisively. And in that choice, I found closure, empowerment, and the courage to never again allow cruelty under the guise of family tradition. 2 years later, Abby was happy, independent, thriving. My parents, still in the small rental, still pointing fingers, still refusing to acknowledge their own cruelty. But we were free. The house that had symbolized decades of quiet suffering became the instrument of liberation. We didn't need apologies, reconciliation, or validation from them. We had each other. And in that there was everything. The weeks after the eviction were oddly peaceful. The silence from my parents, which I had feared, was almost healing. Abby and I spent our evenings together differently. No forced phone calls. No frantic checking on what they were doing. No anxiety about a sudden demand for help. We cooked together, baked, laughed over small victories at school, and slowly, the trauma of that Christmas began to fade. But the weight of what had happened never fully left me. Every time I glanced at Abby, I remembered the curve of her small body on the couch. Her eyes wide and uncertain, her trust in the world so briefly tested. That memory fueled every choice I made after. When the buyers finally closed on the house, it was as if a physical weight had been lifted. The title transferred, the keys handed over, and the legal papers filed. They had to leave. There was no negotiating, no pleading. No matter how loudly Janelle cried to cousins or tried to manipulate extended family. The truth was documented, undeniable, and final. My parents were forced to reckon with consequences for the first time in decades. They had always believed that love or obligation would shield them from accountability. But the eviction was proof that actions have results. I didn't gloat. I simply went about my life letting natural justice do its work. Weeks became months. Abby's confidence grew exponentially. She felt safe in her home, confident in her mother's unwavering support. I watched her bloom, knowing she would never again be forced to question her worth because of other people's insecurities. One afternoon, she came running into the kitchen with a sheet of paper clutched in her hands. "Mom, I got accepted into the STEM program," she shouted. Her voice was bright, triumphant. She had applied for financial aid, and with the funds we had saved from the house sale, I could cover it. She didn't need to ask. She didn't expect me to hesitate. That day, as we celebrated with homemade chocolate cake, I realized something profound. Protection isn't just about shielding someone from immediate harm. It's about creating the space for them to thrive. Meanwhile, my parents' lives became a cautionary tale in small, quiet ways. Their new rental was cramped, the heater insufficient for winter nights, the furniture minimal. Where once they had control, now they were beholden to space, rent, and logistics. They had no one to shield them, no one to mediate. They began calling extended family, each time framing themselves as victims. But the responses were lukewarm at best. Many cousins had already seen through the manipulation. Others were simply unwilling to involve themselves. Over time, their messages turned from desperate pleas to bitter complaints. The audacity of expecting me to repair everything they had caused no longer weighed on me. Abby and I had our world, our peace, and our freedom. By the first anniversary of the eviction, life had settled into a rhythm. Abby excelled in school, began volunteering for science outreach programs, and discovered a love of robotics and coding. I, too, found a deeper contentment. The ER remained demanding, but the knowledge that my family could no longer harm or manipulate us made the long hours easier to bear. One evening, as snow began to blanket the city in white, Abby and I built a small fort in the living room with blankets and cushions. We ate cookies, sipped hot chocolate, and recounted stories from previous years. "You know, Mom," she said softly, "I don't miss them at all." I smiled, feeling a quiet joy that went beyond words. "Neither do I," I replied. Text messages from unknown numbers occasionally buzzed in. "Hope you're proud of what you've done." One read. I deleted it immediately. No hesitation, no reaction. Abby shrugged. "They'll probably text again," she said offhandedly. "Always do," I answered, and for the first time in decades, we meant it. The house, now in new hands, had provided more than financial security. It had provided closure, a line drawn, a boundary respected. Abby and I could live without fear of cruelty disguised as family tradition, without the constant weighing of obligation versus self-preservation. Years passed. Abby thrived. She pursued her passions unapologetically, attended competitions, made new friends, and started developing her own sense of purpose. We traveled to science fairs, coding workshops, and camps she had previously only dreamed of. Every achievement she unlocked, every new skill she acquired, was a reminder that protection and love breed opportunity. My parents. Their life in the rental remained modest, stripped of luxuries, tempered by the reality of a world in which they no longer held control. They continued to cast blame outward, but no one rallied to defend them. They were forced to face the direct consequences of a life lived believing the world owed them deference. By the time Abby was preparing to apply for college, she did so with confidence, independence, and clarity. I supported her fully, guiding where necessary but never imposing. Watching her craft essays, submit applications, and secure scholarships was profoundly satisfying. It was as if the long, difficult path we had walked together, the betrayal, the eviction, the legal battles had all been steps toward this moment of empowerment. One evening, as we reviewed her acceptance letters, she looked up at me and said, "Mom, thank you. Not just for the STEM camp or for the house, but for everything. For standing up, for showing me what's right." My heart swelled. "You had nothing to thank me for, Abby," I replied, tears brimming. "You deserved it. Always did." Life from that point on was a testament to what it means to protect the ones you love. The house, once a symbol of obligation and strained family ties, had transformed into a catalyst for freedom and growth. Abby had grown into a confident, brilliant young woman, unafraid to carve her own path. And I had finally found the courage to place her well-being above old familial bonds that had never nurtured or respected either of us. Even now, every winter, I remember that first Christmas. The cold toast, the heartbreak, the betrayal. But I also remember the strength it awakened in both of us, the boundaries we established and the life we forged together. In the end, the lesson is clear. Family is not always defined by blood or tradition. Sometimes it's defined by love, protection, and the courage to stand up for what is right. Abby and I had that family now, the one we chose for ourselves, and it was infinitely stronger, infinitely safer, and infinitely more beautiful than anything the past had offered. The decisions I made were hard, irrevocable, and at times terrifying. Yet they brought us here, thriving, peaceful, and finally free from the shadows of manipulation and cruelty. And that, more than anything, was worth every struggle, every sleepless night, every tear, and every moment of doubt. Because at last my daughter and I could finally breathe, grow, and live without fear. Even after the storm had passed, life carried quiet reminders of the lessons we had learned. Abby would occasionally pause during homework or a robotics project and look at me with that steady, thoughtful gaze of hers, the one that always seemed older than her 16 years. "Mom," she'd say, "remember when they left me at home that night?" "I did." I remembered the cold toast, the half-eaten banana, the feeling of being invisible. But now, with perspective, I also remembered the courage she had shown. The resilience, the way she hadn't let their cruelty define her. That night I realized had planted a seed of strength in her that no one could uproot. Watching her grow, I began to appreciate the subtle victories more than the grand gestures. Every new skill she mastered, every competition she entered, every friendship she built, was a victory over the years of neglect and condescension she had endured from her grandparents. I never needed to relive the pain to remind myself why I had made the choices I did. It lingered like an echo, a quiet pulse reminding me that protection and love sometimes demand action that others will never understand. Our mornings became slower, more intentional. I brewed coffee while Abby prepared breakfast. We debated science topics, shared music, or simply sat quietly on the porch, feeling the wind brush against our faces. The world had a new softness for us. Freedom from manipulation. Freedom from fear. It was profound in its simplicity. Occasionally, friends would ask why I had made such a bold, uncompromising choice with my parents. I would just smile, thinking of Abby curled up on the couch, confident and unafraid. Some things are worth standing up for, I'd say. Some people are worth protecting. Abby's achievements continued to grow. She won awards, scholarships, and recognition in ways that seemed almost miraculous after years of being sidelined. I took little credit. My satisfaction came from witnessing her joy, her pride, and her sense of self. Every letter of acceptance, every science fair win, every coding challenge she conquered was a testament to her brilliance and our shared perseverance. The house sale, the eviction, the confrontation, it all became a foundation for her future rather than a wound to dwell upon. As for my parents, Their lives carried the inevitable consequences of their choices. The rental became a symbol not of comfort, but of reality. They had to navigate small inconveniences, financial limitations, and the constant awareness that no one was going to bail them out this time. Calls and messages became fewer as the world outside no longer felt obliged to intervene on their behalf. The authority and control they had once wielded evaporated. For the first time, they were not in charge. Not of me, not of Abby, not of the narrative they had so long assumed was theirs. Looking back, I see the story in its entirety. The pain, the betrayal, the heartbreak, but also the triumph, the love, and the lessons hard-earned. I think of Abby, vibrant and fearless. And I know the sacrifices were worth every sleepless night, every legal consultation, every phone call ignored. I have no regrets. The bond we built, fortified through adversity, is unshakable. Our lives are full, our hearts are light. And the space we share is safe and nurturing, because in the end, family is not about entitlement or bloodline. It is about care, respect, and the courage to choose what is right over what is comfortable. Abby and I found that courage together, and it will carry us for the rest of our lives. A shield against cruelty and a foundation for joy, independence, and limitless possibility.